So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening for this information session. We're going to be talking about the Yukon Permanent Art Collection. We've done a couple of sessions like this in past years, and I always like to gather and provide an update to them so that we have this session available for people to view for their benefit, either for learning about the collection or to help them with preparing a submission to the collection, which is the majority of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we've just announced the 2023-2024 call for submissions, and we were very excited to announce that the budget this year has increased to $60,000 and will be that amount moving forward. So it's a great year to apply. It's a great year to learn about the collection, and we're going to be talking about all of that tonight. So before we get officially started, I want to acknowledge that I'm joining tonight from Whitehorse, which is the traditional territory of the Kwanlin First Nation and the Tahanquachan Council. And if others are joining from different traditional territories, I invite you to enter and identify those territories in the chat if you'd like to do that. So we're very grateful to live our lives and to do our jobs and to enjoy these beautiful lands that we all share. I also wanted to introduce myself. So I'm Garnet Muething. I'm the art curator for the Department of Tourism and Culture with the Government of Yukon. And joining me tonight to present this session, we have Courtney Holmes, who is one of the board members of the Friends of Yukon Permanent Art Collection. So thank you very much for that, Courtney. And we're also going to have Heather Callahan, who is another board member of the Friends of Yukon Permanent Art Collection and actually the board's vice president. Before I move on to the next slide, I wanted to acknowledge the artwork on the title slide tonight. This is a work by Jared Kane from 2021 entitled Raven and Creek Mother, and this was a carving that he dedicated to his grandmother. I wanted to introduce the department and the people that I work with so you get a sense of who we are and what we do. So I work for the arts section for the Department of Tourism and Culture, and our team is responsible for taking care of all of the government's art. We also procure and commission new artwork for government, and we work with arts funding programs. So my team in visual arts consists of 3 people. We have a visual arts collections coordinator who takes care of sort of the physical aspects, the documentation and the installation of the collection. And we have a project coordinator who does our programs in terms of professional development for artists, promotion, and also does new commissions and really manages the public art that the government owns. The other part of the arts team deals with our funding programs. So we have 3 arts advisors on our team and our arts managers. So altogether, we're a small but mighty team, and we do our best to help the community in every way that we can to support the amazing arts community and all of the things that people are doing and creating for us. So I take care of the Yukon Permanent Art Collection as sort of the main focus of my job. And then I also take care of public art and works that are sort of long-term and permanently installed in government buildings. We also run conservation and restoration projects when we need to provide some long-term care for those pieces. And then we also have a number of initiatives that we run under a program called the Craft Strategy, where we provide professional development to artists. You may have seen some promotion for some upcoming workshops that we're holding, one where artists can learn how to photograph their work, and we're going to have a few more offerings coming up in the springtime. And then we also have things like on the Travel Yukon site, we have listings that are free for artists to have a listing where they can promote their work and their practice. So just an example of one of our latest commissions. On the right, you'll see a photo of an installation of a new commission we had by Natalie Parenteau at Whistlebend Place that was installed in 2021. So I hope that many of you might have had the opportunity to see that piece if you've been up to Whistlebend lately. A little bit about the history of the Permanent Art Collection. So the collection was created back in 1981 by a group called the Friends of the Gallery, now known as the Friends of Yukon Permanent Art Collection. So they came together with a vision to create a place where artwork being created across the territory would be gathered and kept for the benefit of current and future Yukoners, for visitors, and for other people who want to learn about the diversity of practice happening here. So really the vision was to create a long-term, growing and evolving record of visual art here that would continue to reflect the evolving and growing practice of arts in the Yukon. So the Permanent Art Collection, the way that we show it and allow the public to engage with it includes exhibitions. We loan artwork out to other institutions, both within the Yukon and outside. So we have work traveling around Canada. We have what we call our rotation program, which is where we display artwork in public spaces in over 30 buildings in Whitehorse and also in Dawson, Haines Junction, Mayo, and Faro. And then we run different types of engagement programs with the collection. So this includes things like having people come for tours of our storage space. We'll often bring selections out to school groups or go out to community events and have people see the work in a different context. And the image I'm showing on the right in this slide is from an exhibition we had at the Yukon Art Center in 2021. And the beautiful purse that you see in the foreground is by Lena Moon of Johnson's Crossing. And alongside it are slippers by Martha and Alice Bike from Mayo. Oops. And I'm going to hand over to Courtney to give a little bit of history about the Friends of Yukon Permanent Art Collection.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So FOYPAC stands for the Friends of the Yukon Permanent Art Collection, and this was the original name that was given to the organization when there was a gallery in the former Whitehorse Public Library, as some of you may remember. Then this was before the Art Center was built. So the organization was formed in 1979 and has a role in fundraising and advocating for Yukon art. The collection has been built through donations and grants, and then began working with the government, and now receives an annual purchasing budget. It supports. It's supported by the curator, Garnet, in management of collection and forms a jury of new acquisitions. So. Like Garnet mentioned, we have a $60,000 budget this year, and we have our call for submissions out now. The annual call for submissions started in 2008, and it consists of an arms-length selection committee. So you can see in the photo here, Gertie Tom mitts that were collected in 2016, that were made in 2016, and Trapper's Cabin of Today by Jim Robb, well-known Yukon and beloved Yukon artist, made in 1983.
Thanks, Courtney. So I guess you probably weren't expecting to see pie charts in a presentation about an art collection, so I promise there won't be too many. But I did just want to show you the way that we're sort of tracking what we hold in the collection, because one of the things that I work on with the Friends of Yukon Permanent Art Collection, who Courtney just explained are a separate arm's length society that chooses the work for the collection every year. We're really interested in tracking what the collection holds to make sure that if there are any gaps developing in terms of the way that we're trying to reflect the visual arts practice and the community here, that we're aware of them and we're looking at ways to address them. So one of the things we look at a very high level is just the format of the art in the collection. So we kind of divide it between two-dimensional and three-dimensional work. So two-dimensional, for the most part, being things that you would hang on the wall: paintings, drawings, photography, printmaking, some relief carvings. And then three-dimensional being freestanding carvings, sculpture, metalwork, jewelry, some clothing, regalia, ceramics. You see that there's an other category that is things like installation pieces and some public art. And then we have a small bit of items that qualify as relief. So we're up to over 530 works in the collection after just over 40 years of collecting. We have over 285 artists represented, and you'll see a breakdown there of within the collection of the percentages of work. So paintings forming just slightly the highest percentage of pieces that we have in the collection, and then you'll see a breakdown of the others. So you can categorize this in many ways, but this gives you a broad sense of what we hold in the collection at this point. And then we also look in terms of subject and what kind of themes people are representing in their work. So you'll see that we have a good number of landscapes in the collection, no surprise given how inspiring the landscape is here. A very high percentage of the subject matter we're calling First Nation traditional, which is works that are based on long-standing traditional work with certain types of design elements. We have a lot of figurative work, so works that are representative. We're building our collection of abstract. That's something that we had identified in the past few years that we felt we didn't quite have as much as was being created, so it was something we were looking specifically to develop. We have a good deal of portraiture, First Nation contemporary work, and then lower percentages, we see some functional artwork, public art, and some photo documentation. We also look at gender diversity in the collection. So this is something that we've found really interesting since we started kind of tracking the statistics of the collection, because I think it's very common across Canada that when looking at museum and gallery and public art collections, you'll see that male artists are predominantly represented, which hasn't been the case with this collection, which I think is a reflection of the community here, but also a reflection sort of this being a more contemporary collection. So we're happy with the diversity that we're showing, and hopeful that this is going to continue to represent the community here, but we always want to keep tracking it. And this is showing the communities that are represented in the collection. So this is percentages of communities by artist, not by number of works. I just wanted to make that clear. So we have 21 Yukon communities represented, and as you'll see, over half of the collection, the artists are from Whitehorse, and then you can see the percentages of the other communities in the Yukon. So I say that this is definitely one of our focuses in terms of an area for development. So we've been doing some outreach and meetings in various communities and just trying to build an awareness of the collection and of the process of applying, so that hopefully people have that familiarity and are thinking every year about the timing of the call. And just going to admit one more person. And of potentially applying, because we would love to see more applications and hopefully that resulting in more work coming in from all of the communities around the Yukon. So now I have a number of slides to show examples of work from the collection, because I really wanted you to be able to see what the collection looks like. I expect that hopefully many of you will have seen some of our exhibits or maybe encountered some of our displays through our rotation program. But I just wanted to pull some really diverse works. Some are newer, some are works that came into the collection in the earlier years, so that you have a broad sense of what kind of work we have in the collection. I think one of the most common questions I get is, is there a certain type of work that people want to be in the collection? Is there a certain type of work you're looking for? And almost every year the answer is no. What we want to see is everything that's being created here. We do have some limitations in terms of criteria that we'll talk about a little later on, but the meaning of this collection is really to represent everything that's being made. And so we don't put limits on the kind of media or the style or the genres that people are working in. So the first example I'm showing is a work called Erased by Doug Smarch Jr. Doug is from Teslin, Yukon, and he was the first Yukon artist to have work acquired and shown in the National Gallery of Canada, which is very exciting. This is an example of a photo documentation work. So it's an artwork on its own, but it's also documenting a performance that Doug did in 2002. And this is a great way to collect work that is ephemeral or temporary. We have another photo documentation piece in the collection that's of an ice sculpture. So obviously not something that we were going to be able to hold in the collection, but now we have a record of that piece that sits in the collection that people can see. So Doug is an amazing artist. He also has a piece of public art that's part of the Permanent Art Collection in the Visitor Center in Haines Junction. So I hope that you'll get a chance to see that too. This work is called Thread Beads Land by Crystal Silverfox. This is from 2018. So Crystal was one of the artists who was on the shortlist for the Yukon Prize in 2021. And she was also a finalist for the Sobey Art Award in 2022. So this piece from 2018, we have this triptych, and You'll see that the title, which I don't know the pronunciation of, unfortunately, but this is the Northern Tushone translation of Threadbead's Land. On the left, we have a work by Joseph Tisiga, Obscured Provenance. Joseph was the winner of the 2021 Yukon Prize and one of the recipients of the 2020 Sobe Art Award. He previously lived in Whitehorse, is now based in Montreal, and we have 2 works by Joseph in the collection. So these artists that I'm showing are people who we've been collecting from over the years, and Joseph is certainly someone whose career we have seen really move forward. He's made such huge advancements in the last few years and now has gallery representation and is showing in some really exciting places. So we're very happy for Joseph, and it's great to have some work to represent him in the collection. I should mention that he also has work in the National Gallery of Canada now. On the right, we have a print entitled Quake by Janine Frey-Najutli. This is from 2013. Janine was also a finalist for the Sobe Art Award and has also shown work in the National Gallery of Canada and is currently based in Old Crow. One of the other things that we can talk about and track in the collection is family histories and relationships. With the collection growing to the size it is now, there's all sorts of different narratives that we can explore and we curate within it. And one of my favorite ones is family connections. So I wanted to mention that as we move to the next slide. The mitts on the left are by Joanne Najutli, who was Janine's grandmother. And she was an extremely well-known and respected beater in Old Crow. These mitts were made in the 1970s and then were donated from a private collection to the Yukon Permanent Art Collection. And we didn't know who the beater was when they were first donated, but with the help of the family, we were able to identify that it was Joanne. So now we have these mitts by the grandmother and a print by her granddaughter. And we've had a couple of occasions to show them nearby to each other, and you can really feel that relationship. The beautiful slippers on the right are by Fanny Charlie from Old Crow. These are from 2003. Fanny was an elder in Old Crow and just an immensely respected beater. You can see the perfection in her work. She also taught a great number of other people and shared her skills. So these are examples of really treasured works we have by elders who are no longer with us, but that artists can continue to reference, and so that people can still enjoy their work. On the left, we have a carving by Kitty Smith, who was a very well-known storyteller. Her husband was Chief Billy Smith, and in the 1940s, they lived near Robinson, south of Whitehorse, and they carved these poplar carvings and would sell them to people traveling along the Alaska Highway. So a number of these left the Yukon and have since been collected and come back. The Kwanlundun Cultural Center has a number in their collection. The Daku Cultural Center has a number, and we're lucky enough to have some in the Yukon Permanent Art Collection. So very, very significant pieces. As far as I know, one of the earliest people, especially a woman, working in carving here, and the style is completely unique to her and to her husband. So these are very treasured pieces to have back. On the right, we have a gopher hat by Annie Smith. Annie Smith was an elder with the Kwanlundun First Nation, somebody who was very, very well known for her teachings and her mentorship, especially with sharing her skills with beading and sewing. And Annie's husband, Johnny Smith, was the son of Kitty Smith. So again, explaining those family relationships. And sorry if I'm hesitating a little bit there. I always want to make sure that I'm getting the details right with these relationships. Also unique in the fact that we don't have a lot of work made with gopher skin in the collection. So this hat is quite a beautiful example and still in very good shape, even though it was made in the 1970s. Some examples of paintings from the collection. So I wanted to show a traditional landscape and a more non-traditional landscape. So on the left, we have Ornate Gold Pan by Colin Dorward. I love this piece. I think it's just a really interesting take on the tradition of painting landscapes in gold pans, but Colin has painted a dump in the gold pan, one of the waste disposal sites. So I love how colorful and how much exploration you can do in it, but I also think it's a really fun play on sort of the gold pans that were created to sell as souvenirs of the Yukon. On the right, we have a landscape of Atlin, BC by well-known Canadian artist Doris McCarthy. And these two paintings, work on the left by Mary Caesar. Mary is Casca from the Yard First Nation in Watson Lake. And this is a piece from 2009, Words and Names They Called Me. So Mary created this as part of a body of work. Her practice and her work has addressed her experiences in residential school for quite a long time. And this body of work specifically, she had made into a book that she had accompanying some of her poems and had it published. And so this is a very significant piece in terms of her practice for us to hold in the collection, and also obviously a representative piece to help people sort of understand and come to terms with the residential school system and the aftermath of it. On the right, we have a work from 1990 by Jim Logan, This Canada Angers. Jim was based in Whitehorse for many years and then moved on, was based in Ottawa and worked for the Canada Council for quite a long time. This piece was responding to the Oka crisis. So this is the way that he was processing his feelings and his thoughts at those times, and an important event that we have a record and a response to in the collection. These two paintings are by artists based in Dawson City. On the left, we have Heart Rock Firth River by Cynthia Hunt, a macro view of a gravel bar up on the Firth River done in watercolor at quite a large scale. It's a very impressive piece. And on the right, we have 4:30 at the Annex by Annie Kierans. So this is from a series of portraits that Annie did during the pandemic that she was calling distanced portraits. So this is a scene of two people who were on vacation in Dawson during the short window where there was a bubble where the border was open with BC. And so it's really capturing a moment that I think a lot of people will relate to, a very well-known location in Dawson, and also a moment that, that people will remember very well, because that was a very strange time, especially in Dawson when the summer was very empty and very quiet. On the left, we have a graphite and watercolor work by Kathy Deere called Listeners from 2007. This work we actually just took out of storage because it's going to be part of the Yukon Artists at Work anniversary show at the Yukon Art Center. So little pitch for that show that's opening next week if you have the opportunity to go and see it. I think it's going to be amazing. On the right, we have Raven Stealing the Sun by Amy Tessero. We bought a matching set of these stained glass panels by Amy. So this is the raven, and then we have a matching wolf. So we have the wolf and crow representing the two clans of the Yukon. And we don't have a lot of stained glass in the collection. We only had one other piece, so we were very excited to be able to collect two new pieces from Amy. And I wanted to show some fiber and textile works. The piece on the left is by Faye Chamberlain of Dawson City. This is tufting that she has created and then formed onto an antler piece, and this is called Hints of Easter. On the right, we have an abstract portrait in textile by Rebecca Manius, and this is called Katie from 2021. And I wanted to show some wearable textile and regalia. On the left, this is Winter Solstice Stole by Randy Nelson. And on the right, we have Grandmother's Time by Anne Smith from 1994. So if you aren't familiar with Anne Smith, she is an elder with the Kwanlin Dun First Nation and one of the most well-known Raven's Tail weavers in the Yukon and beyond. And we're very, very fortunate to have a full Raven's Tail robe. These pieces take an immense amount of work and time to create. And some examples of recent carvings from the collection. On the left, this is The Eagle's Feast by Calvin Warburg. The year that we purchased this piece by Calvin, he had had his first solo exhibition at the Yukon Art Center, and he and Brian Walker, who he did a mentorship, learning copper, which you see in the inlay of the eyes of the salmon and the eagle in this piece. They created a totem pole out of copper that was a collaboration that got acquired for the Canada Council Art Bank. So that was a very exciting time for them, and it's great to have a piece from that moment in Calvin's career. On the right, we have Abstract Portrait Mask by Mark Preston. We have a number of works by Mark in the collection, and this piece, I think, just really captured his style and the kind of simplicity that he was going for at that time, which was so beautiful. Unfortunately, Mark passed away last year, and so we're very honored to be able to have a number of his pieces for people to be able to continue to learn from and enjoy. And some examples of photography. So on the left, this is a portrait of a bear that is known as the Mayor of Cluckshoe by Peter Mather from 2020. And on the right, we have an artist book that is made from photography by the artist. And this is actually a book that people can handle and interact with. So we do have a couple of pieces in the collection that some of our installations and these books that people can actually touch, which is really fun. So I want to show a couple of the spots that we have in our rotation program so that you can get an idea of where the art from the collection is when it's out in the world and how people are interacting with it. On the left, this is a display case just outside the library at J.V. Clark Elementary in Mayo. So as people are coming into the school, they see the front of this display case, and then the kids in the library can see the work from the back. So this is a really great spot. We always get very good feedback, and the kids and the teachers all get really excited when we go and put the new work in for the year. On the right, you can see a painting by Emma Barr. This is called Hopeful Horizon that we have at the Yukon Legislative Assembly at the entrance to the cabinet offices. And on the left, I apologize, it's a little hard to see the images here, but this is an overview of the Yukon Legislative Assembly. And we have 4 display cases where we display new artwork every time the House sits for a new session. The hat in the one display case is by Heather Callahan, who is one of the board members joining us tonight. So I just wanted to acknowledge that she's the artist who created that beautiful hat. And the dog blanket you can see in the other case is by Florence Moses. On the right, there's an image of the Haines Junction Visitor Information Center. So twice a year, we go and bring new artwork into that space so that visitors coming in will see the work and also people in the community. Apart from the rotation program, I mentioned that we hold exhibitions of work from the collection. So annually, we have an exhibition to announce all of the new pieces coming in after we make the selections. This is the exhibition we held this year in the lobby of the Jim Smith Building in Whitehorse, and it was called Out in the Open. These works are on display until this spring. So something I always encourage people to do if they're considering applying this to the collection but feel uncertain is to go and see the new works that we just acquired so that you have an idea of what we're collecting and what the most recent pieces are that came in. And it's also just really wonderful to see these works in person. This is an example from an exhibition that we had back in 2021. This is the 40th anniversary of the collection. It was the 40th anniversary in 2021. And so we were lucky enough to be able to have the entire gallery at the Yukon Art Center. We hold shows at the Yukon Art Center about every 3 to 5 years through a partnership with them. And so we filled the gallery with the past 40 years of collecting from the Yukon Permanent Art Collection. And it was really great to see so many of the pieces out in the space together. We also loan artwork to other institutions. So on the left, this is a loan that we did with the Attica Cultural Festival. And we have loaned these pieces by Anne Smith. So in the center, you see her son, Sean, wearing her raven's tail robe, apron, and leggings. And he actually danced in these pieces at the festival that year. So we've worked with the Smith family on a number of occasions for these pieces to be danced. This was always the intention with this regalia, that it should be seen in motion, that people should be able to dance it. That's part of its life. And so we work with them to balance sort of the interaction and the impact that those activities have on the pieces and ensuring that we're taking care of them. But we love working with their family and for people to have the opportunity to see these pieces in motion. And on the right, we have an example of a loan that went to the Harbourfront Center in Toronto a number of years ago. This is a collection of dog blankets that was created for an anniversary for the Yukon Quest. And there was a ceremonial dog team that actually started the race wearing those blankets that year. And now they're part of the collection. So they were having a winter festival at Harbourfront. Nicole Bauberger, who is joining us tonight, was actually instrumental in putting this loan together. So I wanted to acknowledge and thank her for that, because I think that Toronto would be a really interesting place to show a collection of dog blankets from the north. I expect that a lot of the people in that audience had never seen or even considered a dog blanket before. So it was great to have work by that many Yukon artists go to Toronto that year. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to apply to have your work in the collection, and I'm going to hand off to Courtney for this section.
Hi folks, so now you probably have a pretty fair understanding of what the collection is and where to see it. Just to note that there are a substantial number of years of recently collected works that are available on the FOYPAC website. So if you are interested in checking out more, foypac.ca, and you can see the acquisitions, again, going back probably maybe about 10 years. So it's great that you're joining us tonight because we want you to apply to the Permanent Art Collection. So how is that done? You're going to want to submit images of completed artworks, and including details such as dimensions, materials, and price. You're going to want to include a short statement about your artwork. What is it about? What are you trying to say? What do you want people to learn about you and your work? Consider tone and voice. How does this piece reflect you and your practice? Certainly you're going to want to include your CV and or biography, both ideally. There are a million resources online if you are looking for assistance with this. And in fact, there's a resource section on the FOYPAC website that you can go to and view former workshops about these very topics. Statements should be less than 1 page, biographies between half a page and a full page. Just consider who is the audience reading this, and you may want to consider multiple versions of your biography, and consider which one is most suitable for this call. Feel free to ask your family for feedback. Have them read over your bio, have them read the statement, your artwork statement as well. See if they can connect the artwork back to you and if it makes sense. So that would be certainly a route that you could go to receive some feedback. You're going to really want good quality images. This is important. And as Garnet mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there are upcoming workshops, both online and in person, where you can go and learn how to take good images of your artwork. I can't emphasize this enough. As a jury member, we really like to see good quality images because we're not seeing your pieces in person until they're acquired. So we want a really good understanding of how the pieces were made. We want to see them in good lighting, lots of detail. So please, consider that deeply when you are when you're applying. And please make note of the deadline. If you're submitting an application by mail, consider how long it might take to get to Garnet and her department. So the deadline is January 31st, 2024. You've got a number of weeks and to get your submissions in, and a number of weeks to still use Garnet as a resource if you're looking for support in submitting your artwork. Okay, ready?
Fine. Oops. There we go.
Okay. So again, we'll go in just a little bit deeper here. Artwork statements, again, consider the content of your statement, the tone and voice, the length. It doesn't have to be a novel. We just want a statement about your piece. Again, half page to a page is sufficient. And again, consider the audience. We are a jury of art lovers. We're probably familiar with you. We might have collected your work already. And again, just emphasizing that point again, get feedback from your peers, from your family. They know you best, and they'll be able to communicate whether you are communicating well back to the jury. And again, some things to include in your artwork statements. Why did you create this work? How did you create it? We want to understand your process. That brings some depth and understanding to your artwork. Why is it important to your practice? Where does this piece that you're submitting lie in terms of your career? Are you an emerging artist? Are you mid-career? Are you a professional artist? We want to understand the ideas and themes in your work. If it is an abstract work, it maybe takes a little bit more effort communicating what your work is to the jury. So certainly help us out and help make those connections between your work and what it is that you're trying to explain. And yes, again, connections. What is your inspiration? What's the story? What are the major themes? How does this work tie in to your creative career? And what is it? What are you saying? And your biography. Again, we might already know who you are, but pretend that we don't. So we want to know about your background, how you became an artist. Why did you choose the medium that you chose? What is the connection there? Tell us how or why you became an artist. What motivates you? What drives you in terms of your work? And any central themes. And again, your personal voice and connection. And there are additional criteria, or if you want to just review the criteria again, they're available on the FOYPAC website. Feel free to check that out. And CVs. It's artist CVs, very similar to a CV as if you were applying for a job. We want to know about you, if you have any education in the arts. And it doesn't have to be formal. Mentorships count. Have you done particular training? We want to know about your exhibition and exhibition history. Bibliography, if you've been published, or if you've written something, or if someone's written something about your work. Have you been collected? Please list what collections your work is in. Again, if you've done any writing, teaching, curatorial projects, awards, grants, and residencies. It's all right there. We want to know about you. Tell us in your CV, kind of formally, who you are.
And I just wanted to add, this is a very long list that we've put together. It's sort of everything that you could include in a CV. But one of the questions I get often from people is they're concerned that either their CV is very short because they're just beginning in their artistic practice, or that they don't have one. And both of those things are fine. It's not going to count against you to have a short CV. It's really just a space where you can offer exactly these elements so that people understand a bit more about your practice and where you're coming from, but you won't be penalized for having a short one. And if you don't have one yet, that's also okay.
And let me just emphasize again how important photography is. Again, since we're not seeing your work in person, we really want to understand what it is that you've just made and you're submitting. So digital images, really important. As it's laid out here, you can see that there's an in-person photo session December 2nd, online December 6th, and then actual photography sessions in Whitehorse and Dawson in mid-January. So it is before the deadline. Definitely, if it makes sense to you, bring in your artwork in these January sessions to get professionally photographed. This is a really crucial part of the application. So if I haven't said it a million times already, please get really good digital images of your work. So additional materials that you can include with your application. Reviews, articles about you, or about your work. If you were in a group show, if your work has traveled somewhere and it's been written about, include that as well. Like Garnet mentioned, you don't need an exhaustive CV. We want to see what people have said about you, if they said something about you. So definitely include those as well in your application. Once again, really great photos is a major element to these applications. Again, check out the criteria, the selection criteria. These are the criteria that the jury works off of. This is how we, these are elements that we look at, that we use to judge your work when it comes in. So certainly take a look at the criteria. It's on the FOYPAC website, and consider how does your work fit into the collection. It's one of the ways that we judge the work is how, to what degree, how does the work fit into the collection. So that is something you're going to want to explain. And remember, it is a competitive process. So if your work is not selected, that doesn't mean it wasn't appreciated or respected or wanted. It should be noted that last year we had 102 works submitted and we selected 13. So It's not often that the first time you apply, you're going to get selected for the permanent art collection, but keep trying. The process is meant to give artists an experience that will build their skills and materials for applying for other opportunities. So certainly treat it like that. You will have other instances where you will be asked to apply put together your CV, your bio, your statements, and good photographs. And that this process of applying to the permanent art collection can be transferred to any other kind of situations where you might want to apply for grants, apply for shows, whatnot. So it's a process that you can certainly learn from. And so there's value in the process. Are there any questions at this point?
I see a couple of questions in the chat, so we can answer those. Maybe I'll just go to the next slide so we can mention the criteria, Courtney, and then we can move into the questions. Does that sound good? Great. There we go. So this criteria was, oops, and I just erased it. There we go. This criteria is on the FOYPAC website, as Courtney had mentioned. That's at foypac.ca. So this is under resources for artists, and these are the high-level areas of the criteria. There is a bit more detail in there, so I encourage you to go and take a look at them. This is what the selection committee uses when they're going through the submissions and making their considerations. And so it gives you a good idea of what kind of values and areas we're looking to fill within the collection. I think someone asked earlier about different types of formats of work, and I saw a question about can I submit an installation? So I did want to address this within the criteria. When you look at the guidelines for the collection, we do have a size limitation. And the reason that we have had to include that for the past few years is that our storage space is getting quite full. And so we have to be careful about the size of work that we can collect. The other reason is that predominantly the areas where we show the work from the collection for our rotation program can only host work up to a certain size. And so we try to collect the majority of the work at sizes that can fit into most of our display locations. There are obviously exceptions. We have some absolutely stunning large scale paintings. We have some installation pieces that can only be shown sort of in a larger gallery like the Yukon Art Center. But for the most part, what we want to be collecting is pieces that we can get out for the public to see and enjoy in a lot of our different locations. So it gives us the flexibility to do that. But if you have questions or concerns about the size or format of work that you're thinking of submitting, I'm happy to talk to you about those. The other question that came up was, what size of digital photos are you looking for? How high resolution? So we used to have a series of slides all about resizing digital images because it was something that was really presenting a challenge to a lot of folks when they applied. But what I found was all of the different programs changed every year. So we couldn't sort of walk people through step by step because everybody was using different preview programs. For the most part, we're looking for images at about 300 DPI and about 2 megabytes in image size. That should give us a lot of resolution to be able to zoom in on details. If you're applying with a work that is very complex in terms of texture, details, materials, it's great to provide some detail shots so that we can already have a zoom in on those details and then look at them a little further if we want to. So we don't have a limit on the number of images, but usually an overall shot and 2 or 3 details will give us a very good idea of the work. I'm just going to move ahead to the last slide, which has all of the information about the call for submissions for this year.
Garnet, do you also want to include a little bit about the video submissions that come in sometimes?
About video submissions?
Yeah, just if it's like a moving installation, like I know we've seen some video submissions come in. I don't know. Yeah, just that it helps with the selection process if it's also like a clear video submission, and it's really it helps with being able to look at the images and just to understand the art a bit more as well. But yeah, Garnet, if you wanted to touch on video submissions.
That's a great point, Heather. Yeah, we in the past few years have had more and more people submit videos. So it's either sort of a pan over an artwork. In one case, it was a sculpture that was hanging from a spring, so we could see the way that it moved. And it gave us a very, very good sense of the presence of that object in space. So videos as well as photos, if that's something that will help the jury understand your work, I think are a great way to go. At first, when Heather asked the question, I thought she was talking about video works, time-based media, which is also something that we've had come in. And so just in case anybody's thinking in those terms, at this point, when somebody wants to submit a video work to the collection, it needs to be something that would be presented in a gallery format, like an installation for people to see. And we need to have all of the equipment to present that video included as part of the submission. So if any of you work in that format and want to talk to me further, we can go over the details there. Are there any other questions?
No.
Okay, I'm seeing one in the chat. What are the chances of selecting new emerging artists? Are you aware of other avenues to get your name and work out there prior to applying? Great question. So we have had emerging artists have their work selected. As Courtney said, it is a competitive process. And so I think what Courtney said was accurate in terms of, having your work selected the first time you apply is not as likely. We always encourage people to keep applying, and we keep the submission process quite straightforward so that it's fairly easy for people to apply year after year if they'd like to. Other ways to get your name out there, there are lots of ways. So getting a membership with one of the Yukon Arts organizations so that you can start showing your work in galleries, whether in group shows or on your own, is great. There are lots of venues around Whitehorse. I'm not as familiar with venues in the smaller communities, but I know certainly Haines Junction and Dawson have a number of businesses where you can show your artwork. And certainly in Whitehorse, that's a great way to get your work out there if you're not feeling like you're quite ready to step into a gallery yet. The world of Instagram is wide and busy, and people are getting all kinds of work out there and getting tons of followers that way. So I think Facebook and Instagram and social media are a very good way. And I think also, making contacts, going out to some arts events, meeting people, introducing yourself, talking about your work, and talking to people about their work. I think interacting with other artists and just, gaining some momentum in what you're doing, getting that name recognition out so that you're introducing yourself and people know who you are, and applying to calls like this so that people are seeing your work and starting to recognize it. I think, whether your work gets selected or not, we currently have 9 people on the board of the Friends of Yukon Permanent Art Collection. These are people from the community who are artists themselves, who are curators, who are arts administrators, volunteers, arts appreciators. So also having your name recognized and seen by those people can lead to other opportunities beyond having your work collected for the collection. And Janet is saying, Yukon Artists at Work welcomes new members. And they are a great place to go and become a member and show your work and have access to all kinds of other amazing artists to network with.
And on behalf of the jury, there is interest in collecting work from artists who are at various points in their careers.
Absolutely.
So it's not an impossibility that you're an emerging artist and your work is collected in the Yukon Permanent Art Collection. Certainly, we won't know unless you submit an application. So if you are emerging, please apply. We want to see those applications.
Yeah, this is very true. Paul, were you trying to ask a question? We couldn't tell if your audio wasn't working.
I'm not sure if my audio is working.
Yeah, it is. I can hear you.
Like I retired recently. I've been turning for about 15 years, and my sister is quite well known in the arts community, Sheila.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of the pieces I've done, what she said, you should really look at submitting them. So I'm I don't really have a question. I'm just kind of at odds. I'm not sure of what I'm doing, so to speak, and I don't really have enough confidence. So, but I will try to get this one particular piece in. The photography was really going to cause me issues, and from the looks of it, I can get a professional session done through the submission process, which would probably help me out a great deal.
Yes, definitely. So I hope that you'll apply. So I'm happy to know that your sister is Sheila. We just acquired a sculpture by Sheila, which is in the show that I mentioned. That's at the Jim Smith building until the spring, a beautiful sculpture of a horse. So I'm glad you mentioned the photography sessions again. I think we should count the number of times Courtney and I have said photography in this presentation. So I just wanted to clarify because we have 2 opportunities coming up. So on December 2nd, we have a photography workshop for people who want to learn how to photograph their work. And this is going to be Eric Pinkerton, who's a local photographer, teaching people how to use point and shoot cameras, phones, whatever you have access to, and kind of everyday equipment and lighting. On December 6th, we'll have an online version of that photography workshop with Eric Pinkerton. So for people who can't join in person, he'll be offering that same workshop online in an abbreviated format. So those are for people that want to learn photography. And then in January, the week before the deadline, which is January 31st, just in case people need a reminder about that one. Also, Eric Pinkerton is going to be doing photography for you. So this is where you just bring in your work. He's all set up and he can take photos of your work so that you can use those in your submission. And the great thing about taking part in those sessions is that you also have access to those photos for things like your portfolio, for applying to other opportunities for your website. So you can use those for other opportunities that you want to apply on.
Okay. Thank you. That's good to know.
Yes, Nicole?
Yeah, I was wondering, that's great news about the increase in budget. It seems like maybe that will like allow the collection to, I mean, I know size is a problem, but to acquire larger works or something like that. Can you talk a bit about how the change in budget, how you see that having an impact on what happens?
Absolutely. So I think, the first year with our increased budget will determine a lot in terms of what that's going to look like. I would say that in past years, there have been a lot of examples of work where we had a longer list than we could pay for with the budget that we had available to us. And there were some real heartbreaks in terms of works that we just weren't able to acquire. And so I think the first thing that will happen is that we'll be able to just go further down that list of works that people really feel strongly are a great fit for the collection. I also hope that it will encourage artists to submit some works that are, at a higher price point. It doesn't necessarily mean that the work will be larger. In some cases it will, in some cases it will just mean that the format means that it's a higher price point. And I also think that it will offer us some flexibility in terms of sometimes going to artists for commissions and direct purchases, which is something that we often look to do with elder artists who we're really hoping to collect from and have their work represented in the collection, or other places where there are gaps that we're going directly to artists and asking them to commission work. It's not something that we do frequently, but having a larger budget will allow us the flexibility to do that. So earlier in the presentation, there was the image of Gertie Tom with her mitts. That was a direct purchase that we did with Gertie. We also worked with Pearl Keenan's family a number of years ago so that we acquired a handmade gun case and some mitts from her. And so I see more opportunity for that kind of work, which is really exciting. And hopefully just longer lists of the new acquisitions each year, and hopefully representing some, more art forms and artists being able to submit some works from bodies of work that they feel are very significant, and hopefully acquiring more works at a higher price point as a group than we've been able to do in the past.
How is that? I guess you have the new storage at the archives now. Is that part of what makes this possible?
We do. So we store the collection at the Yukon Art Center. We have a storage vault that we share with the Art Center's Permanent Art Collection. It's purpose-built. It's an amazing art storage facility. It's very, very maxed out in terms of space. And so we are working with the Yukon Archives. They had a new vault built a few years ago, and it was built with space for their growing collection of government records. And so we've been able to borrow some of that space in the meantime, which is also like a climate-controlled, beautifully built vault. So at this point, we're working in partnership with them. And exactly what you said, Nicole, we've been able to continue to collect because we have that space. And we've also been expanding the rotation program. When I began in this position, it was 13 years ago, and we had about 30% of the collection out on display, which is pretty significant compared to other public collections. And we are striving to keep at a third, even though the collection is growing. And so we're trying to add new rotation locations, and we've also had increased demand for loans, which has been amazing. So we're also trying to make sure that there's a good percentage out of storage, as well as the pieces that we have at rest in storage, as a way to balance those pressures on our storage spaces and make sure the collection's out in the world where people can enjoy it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't really have a question. I have a comment. I think like the Yukon is so rich with artists because of the long winters. And people just like have to find things to do the long dark winters. But it's such like I'm born and raised here, and it just never ceases to amaze, like, you know, people that think of themselves as artists or people that just do it like at the kitchen table. There's just so much talent here, and it's very exciting and just a huge part of our I think our Yukon identity and culture here. And just it's really Garnet and her team takes such care in the art, and just how it's being taken care of for the long term, how it's exhibited, how they make it look for the public, how they do their publications. Like, they just take so much care in all the details. And also just with like feedback on the photos or the art, descriptions, like all of it. They really go through it and take a lot of care in all the work. So the feedback is always super helpful to grow and get your creative side out there. So I really hope that we get lots of submissions. It's really exciting that we have this additional support this year and a bigger budget. So yeah, really excited for all the new submissions coming in.
Thanks, Heather. So just following up on what Heather said, we mentioned it earlier, but I do want to emphasize that my team and I are here to help. So if you have any questions, hesitations, considerations, if you'd like somebody to look over your writing and give you feedback, if you would like to come in and have us complete an application for you or with you, we're here to do any level of support that you need to have your applications come in. The photography workshops in January have not been scheduled yet, but we'll have those dates confirmed very soon. They're going to be taking place in Whitehorse and Dawson. So if you get in touch with me, we can register you as soon as we have sessions open. And the other piece that Heather mentioned was feedback. So after you receive your response, if your work isn't selected, I always encourage people to contact me. And if your work made it into, so we have a multi-stage process with the selections, and we kind of create a short list out of all of the submissions, and those are the pieces that get discussed in the selection committee room. With well over 100 submissions each year, we don't have time to go over every single piece as a group because it would be so much time. I mean, it would be great to sit and talk about artwork for a week, but we usually have 2 days to make all of the selections. And so if your work got onto the short list and was discussed by the group, I can share some of the feedback with you. And, you know, in some cases, artists have contacted me, and that feedback that they've received has been immensely helpful to them in future submissions. And even just in their own practice, they really value getting that feedback. So that support after the fact is also available to you, and I'm happy to have those conversations. Don't see any other questions in the chat. Are there any questions on people's minds or anything else they'd like to share?
I'd just like to say thank you. This was a very informative session.
Thanks everyone for coming. It's great to see so many faces. How many pieces are on, oh, the short list, are on the short list? Francoise was asking that question. Thanks, Francoise. The number of works on the short list kind of depends on the year. So the way we work it is each person who's on the selection committee gets a certain number that they can choose. And so, for example, say we have 100 works submitted, I would probably say to people, out of those works, you can nominate 10 pieces onto the short list. So if there is a lot of overlap between everybody's short lists, maybe we'll have 20 to 30 works. If there's a lot of diversity on those short lists, then our short list will be much longer. So that really varies depending on the number of submissions we get in and on the responses of the selection committee, which is one of the really great parts of that process, because it's incredible to see people's responses. Sometimes, you know, everybody forms a consensus very quickly about a work, and sometimes people are very divided, but all of that generates really, really valuable and deep discussions about the art, which is really fun. Thank you for the questions. I think it's great to be able to talk through the process. I hope that that's really helping everyone to understand what we do. Okay. Well, it looks like we can wrap up. So thanks everybody for coming tonight. Please get in touch if you have questions or you'd like to register for any of our workshops or photo sessions, and hopefully we'll see submissions coming in from you in January.